Your Honor, I never believed I'd find myself here, accusing the man who once called himself my husband of betrayal. The words lay suspended in the air, a storm cloud unwilling to dissipate. The courtroom came to a standstill. A handful of individuals gasped aloud. A buzz spread through the gallery as heads swiveled, eyes opening in shock, and hushed murmurs filled the wooden hall. Some could hardly believe what they were hearing. Others already knew, deep in their hearts, they had been anticipating this moment. At the witness stand stood Emily Carter. She clutched the wooden rail in front of her so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, carried the weight of a woman who had been broken, humiliated, and deceived, but who had also risen, scar by scar, stronger than before. Emily wasn't here for herself alone. She wasn't even here for her children. She was here to demonstrate to the world, and most particularly to him, that betrayal had consequences. In the corner of the room sat Daniel Carter, her ex-husband, the man she had trusted with all things, her heart, her future, her children. The man she had trusted as her protector, her partner, her sanctuary. Now he was a stranger. His jaw was clenched, his lips locked in a thin, bitter line. His eyes, once warm and full of charm, now were cold, sharp, narrowed with resentment. He sat rigidly next to his lawyer, arms crossed, as if to construct a wall between him and the tempest brewing around him. To the naked eye, he seemed serene, but Emily was wiser. She had lived alongside him for 20 years. She knew his nerves were coming undone thread by thread behind that mask. The judge, a serious woman with her silver hair pulled into a tidy bun, leaned forward. She examined Emily with a glint of empathy coupled with restraint, her pen tapping lightly on papers before her. Then there was the sound that quieted the whispers. Bang! The gavel fell once, ringing like thunder in the tense chamber. Proceed, the judge instructed firmly. And just like that, the fight for justice started. Emily breathed deeply. Her heart thumped against her ribcage, each thump yelling at her to sit down, to flee, to conceal herself. She remained standing. Too long she had kept quiet. Too long she had swallowed the lies and endured the pain. No more. She looked over to the gallery. Her sister sat in the far back row, praying with clasped hands. Her children weren't present. They'd been spared the courtroom, but their absence was another load on Emily's shoulders. They were her voice now. Her defender. Her mother. Her lawyer. A smart, poised woman named Claire Roberts nodded from the sideline. Tell your story. Her eyes communicated. Emily faced the judge again. Her voice steadied. Your Honor, I gave this man 20 years of my life. I gave him my loyalty, my trust, my heart. I stood by him when he lost his job, when he got ill, when he worked late nights telling me he was working overtime. I believed it all, because that's what you do when you love a person. You believe. She too paused, swallowed hard. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his attorney taking furious notes. But what I didn't know, Emily went on, her voice choking, was that while I was clipping coupons to purchase groceries, he was stashing money in hidden accounts. While I was rocking our babies to sleep, he was writing letters to another woman, promises that he would leave us all behind. While I was keeping this family together, he was pulling it apart. The gallery gasped once more. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel's lawyer jumped up fast. Objection, Your Honor, slander without proof. The judge held up her hand serenely. Overruled. Mrs. Carter, please go on. Emily nodded, her mouth parched, but her resolve increasing. She directed her gaze at Daniel for the first time since she had started talking. He glared back, his face impassive, but his jaw jerked, a tiny giveaway she knew. He was shaken. Daniel Carter, she told him bluntly, her voice slicing through the quiet. You once gazed into my eyes and swore you loved me. You once vowed to our children, they would always be first. But the fact is, you loved money more than us. You loved your hidden life more than the life you constructed with me. Daniel leapt to his feet, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. That's a lie. he shouted, jabbing a finger at her. The courtroom exploded in gasps and murmurs. The bailiff advanced, ready to step in. "Mr. Carter," the judge snapped, her gavel coming down for the second time. "Sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt." Daniel's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths as he stared at Emily, his eyes hot with rage. For an instant it seemed as if he would dash across the room. But then, with a fierce inhalation, he slumped back into his chair, cursing in a low voice. Emily didn't move. She had feared his rage for years. No longer. The judge looked to her. "Mrs. Carter, please proceed." Emily braced herself, shaking slightly in her hands. She pushed them firmly against the wooden pedestal, anchoring herself. "Your Honor," she had whispered, her voice cracking now. "I didn't want this. I didn't want my children to have grown up in a broken home. I didn't want to be sitting here before strangers and admit the darkest secrets of my marriage. But I can no longer remain silent. Silence does only serve the guilty, and my children are entitled to know the truth." Tears streamed down her face now, her voice unsteady with sorrow. Finding the letters, seeing the bank statements. It was as if my whole world had crumbled. I wasn't only losing a husband, I was losing the man I believed he was, and that's not a sorrow you can prepare yourself for. It's a betrayal that cuts deeper than any blade. The gallery was still, some were dabbing at the tears. Even the judge's face looked affected, though it didn't change. Emily took a tremulous breath. "But I stand here today," she asserted, "not as a victim but as a survivor. I will not be defined by his lies. I will not let his betrayal kill my children's future. I will fight for them, Your Honor. I will fight until the truth is undeniable." She raised her chin, her eyes shining with both sadness and courage. Across the room, Daniel sat grim-faced, arms folded tighter, jaw clenched. But for the first time in years, Emily felt something strong. Control. The judge leaned forward once more. She clicked her pen, glancing at Emily. "Mrs. Carter," she said calmly, "this court will hear your testimony. We will hear your story in its entirety, and we will determine the truth." The gavel banged again. Bang. The noise reverberated, locking the moment into place like history itself being engraved. And it was done. The war for justice had been waged. Emily shut her eyes for the shortest moment. She could sense her children's hands wrapped around hers, their quiet encouragement bolstering her. This was not merely a trial, it was an accounting, and she was ready. The courtroom was abuzz with nervous tension, following Emily's dramatic opening testimony. The gallery whispered, heads swiveling, eyes flicking between Emily and Daniel like onlookers at a prize fight. The judge slammed the gavel. Bang. "Order in the court." The whispers ceased at once. Emily's lawyer, Claire Roberts, stood and walked to the middle of the room, with a thick leather folder. She walked with the air of a woman who knew that she had the truth in her possession. "Your Honor," Claire started, her tone crisp and authoritative, still addressing the judge before turning to Daniel. "The defense would like this court to accept my client's words as nothing more than emotional hyperbole. But what I have in my hands is proof, clear evidence, that Daniel Carter not only betrayed his wife, but engaged in deliberate financial falsehoods that put his own family at risk." She placed the folder on the evidence table with a crisp snap that made Daniel wince. "Exhibit A," she announced, drawing out a sheaf of papers. "These are the Carters' 10 years' worth of joint bank statements. Look at the consistent withdrawals. Little at first, big later, and always masquerading as business expenses." She riffled page after page, her fingers fast, her voice growing sterner with each sentence. "Exhibit B, a secret account in Daniel Carter's name, under a business pseudonym. Into that account, he diverted more than $200,000, dollars stolen outright from the family's savings, dollars that should have been spent on his children's future, their house, their safety." Gasps filled the gallery. A woman at the rear leaned forward and whispered, $200,000. A man farther back shook his head and grunted, "Unbelievable." Daniel shifted, his crossed arms uncrossing for the first time. His lawyer leaned in close to him, whispering angrily. But Daniel's eyes were on Emily, eyes filled with anger, but also fear. Emily's heart was racing. She felt naked, embarrassed that the intimate terrors of her marriage were out in the open. But she felt relieved too. The truth was no longer contained within her. It was out. It was inescapable. Claire wasn't finished. She took out another paper, this one with a name typed in bold letters across the top. Exhibit C, she said. $50,000 wire transferred to Sophia Miller. The name cut through the courtroom like a blade. Emily's throat constricted. Sophia. The person she used to trust as a friend. The person she trusted, laughed with, welcomed into her home. To realize she was the one Daniel had decided to betray her for. It was a cut that never healed. A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. Some gasped, others shook their heads in disgust. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was deeply personal. Daniel suddenly slammed his hand on the table. This is twisted. Sophia is just a friend. His voice cracked with anger, but his words felt hollow. Claire's eyes narrowed. A friend, Mr. Carter? Then perhaps you'd like to explain the letters. The courtroom fell still. Letters, the judge repeated. Claire produced another set of documents, held together with a clip. Handwritten letters from Mr. Carter to Miss Miller, retrieved from my client's house. Letters in which he professes his love for Miss Miller, his desire to leave his wife, and his intention to begin a new life on the fortune he secretly drained. She passed them over to the bailiff, who took them to the judge. The judge raised her eyebrows slightly as she read the front page. Emily's chest constricted as she recalled that day she'd discovered them, folded in an old coat in the garage. Daniel's scribbled handwriting staring back at her. Every word she'd read then had broken her a little more. She listened to the judge's voice as the first letter was read. Sophia, my love. I can't continue living this dual existence. Each day with Emily is torture. Just hold on. I'll figure out how to eliminate her. Soon it'll just be us. The words resounded in the chamber. The gallery exploded in outrage. Gasps, muttering, even a few screams filled the air. Emily's knees turned weak. She clutched the wooden stand, resisting sobs. To have the words said out loud, in public before strangers, was torture. But it was justice too. Everyone could see now. Everyone could know. Daniel sprang to his feet once more. Face flushed, fists balled. Those letters don't matter. They're old, they were just fantasies. Nothing real. But his voice betrayed him. It trembled. His words stumbled. The judge's gavel clanged down. Mr. Carter, sit down. One more eruption and I'll have you removed. Daniel's lawyer pulled at his sleeve, hissing, keep your temper in check. He sat, but his frame trembled with wrath, his face a maelstrom of denial and fear. Claire addressed the judge once more. Her voice was crisp, assertive. Your Honor, this is not a miscommunication case. This is intentional fraud, emotional abuse, and breach of trust. My client is not only battling monetary justice, she is battling for her dignity, for her children's safety, and for the truth that Mr. Carter has worked for decades to keep hidden. Emily felt the tears run down her face, but this time she didn't conceal them. She let the world witness her agony, because it wasn't hers alone. It was the agony of all the broken vows, all the restless nights, all the sacrifices she had made, and he had spent living a deception. The judge relaxed in her seat, arms crossed, her face a mask. The evidence had tipped the room. What had started out as a nasty divorce case was fast becoming a fight of conscience, of morality, of truth against lies. Emily gazed at Daniel. For years she had wondered if ever he felt guilty, if ever he looked at what damage he had done. But the man across from her wasn't the one she used to love. He was somebody different now, empty, bitter, trapped. And for the first time, she understood something strong. She was no longer afraid of him. She lifted her head, her shoulders squaring. The world now knew what he had done. He couldn't spin the truth anymore. He couldn't gaslight her, couldn't alter the past. Emily Carter had finally torn away Daniel Carter's mask. And in the hush that ensued, the whole courtroom knew. This wasn't about money. This was about betrayal. This was about dignity. This was about the truth finally emerging. The gavel of the judge hit for the second time. Bang. We will take 15 minutes recess before proceeding with additional testimony, declared the judge. The bailiff requested order as the room erupted into chatter. Individuals stood, shaking their heads and whispering indignantly. Others glared at Emily in sympathy, others at Daniel in disdain. Emily sat, her hands shaking, but her heart more solid than it had been in years. She'd weathered the storm. She'd lived through the first battle. And she knew, deep inside, the war over justice was just starting. The courtroom had hardly calmed from the tempest of evidence, when the massive wooden doors creaked open. The sound flashed through the chamber, harsh and sudden, drawing all eyes to the door. Whispers broke out at once. Who walked into such an explosive environment right now? And there she was, Lily Carter, Emily's 17-year-old daughter. Her appearance was a flash of lightning across a blackened sky. No one had anticipated her. She wasn't on the list as a witness. But when she stepped forward, holding a small spiral-bound notebook to her chest, her face white but resolute, the whole courtroom caught its breath. Emily's heart sprang into her throat. No, Lily, not here, not you. She longed to dash to her daughter, protect her from the stares, from the burden of what was happening.
Oh.
But she couldn't budge. All she could do was stand there while Lily strode past the seats of onlookers, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished wood floor. The judge raised an eyebrow, leaning forward slightly. Young lady, this is highly irregular. Who are you? Lily stopped at the front, her voice trembling but clear. I'm Lily Carter, Emily and Daniel's daughter. The room erupted in gasps. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked, and spectators exchanged wide-eyed glances. Emily's hand shot to her mouth. Her baby, her little girl, was about to step into the storm. Daniel's face contorted in anger. No, he growled, banging his fist on the table. She doesn't belong here. She's a child, she doesn't belong in this courtroom. But the judge raised her hand, stopping him in his tracks. Mr. Carter, sit down. Miss Carter, if you feel you have something of relevance to this case, this court will hear you. The bailiff stepped forward and guided Lily carefully to the witness stand. She seemed so tiny in comparison to the looming wood, but as she rested her right hand on the Bible and promised under oath, there was a silent strength in her that no one could ignore. Emily brushed at her tears, muttering softly, "Be strong, baby, be strong." The judge nodded. Miss Carter, you may speak. Lily held her notebook close, her knuckles white, and then gazed at her father. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice, though gentle, reached across the entire room. Your Honor, she said, I know I'm only 17, but I can't be quiet anymore. I have seen, I have read, things my father didn't want anyone to ever know. Daniel sprang to his feet once more. Lily, stop this at once. You don't know what you're saying. The judge banged down her gavel. Mr. Carter, sit down. You will not intimidate this witness. The room shook under the gravity of the moment. Lily opened her notebook, her fingers trembling. Within were pages of creased letters, frayed with age and tear marks. She extracted one cautiously, her breathing unsteady. Hush, she breathed. One of these letters I discovered. Letters written by my father to Sophia Miller. The gallery gasped again. Daniel's lawyer scrambled, exclaiming in a hushed tone, Don't read it, don't. But Lily's voice grew louder, shaking but unyielding. She read aloud, Sophia, I hope for the day that I can just walk away from Emily and the children. They don't get me like you do. I'm getting the money. It won't be much longer. When I have enough, I'll leave, and there will just be you and me. Her voice cracked on the final words. Tears streamed down her face, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. Another letter, another vow, another letdown. I've already started moving money. Emily will never notice. By the time she does, it will be too late. Lily and the others, they'll get over it. They'll understand someday. Emily fell into silent weeping, her entire frame trembling. Every word cut her down like a knife, but her daughter's strength kept her anchored. The courtroom was still, shocked. Even the reporters ceased writing. It was as if the world itself had halted to listen to the truth. Daniel's face went white, his jaw hanging, eyes bulging with terror. He looked, for the first time, like a cornered man, deprived of each and every lie. Lies he finally managed, his voice breaking. Those are lies, planted she doesn't know. But no one was hearing him, because everyone could see it. The unadulterated truth, the unmitigated betrayal. The judge leaned in, her tone low, but unyielding. Miss Carter, did you observe your father penning these letters? Lily nodded, chin shaking. Yes, Your Honor. I saw him late one night, working in this same notebook. Before he ripped out the pages, he did not see that I was watching. I held some because I was afraid. I did not know what to do. I thought perhaps he did not mean it. But then the money began to disappear, and I knew. Her voice broke. She glared at her father, sobbing. I knew you were abandoning us, Dad. The courtroom was choked with emotion. Even strangers in the courtroom were quietly weeping. Daniel's hands trembled on the table, his face contorted in desperation. Lily, darling, please. You don't realize. But Lily set her chin, her tears sparkling. No, Dad, you don't get it. You broke us. You broke Mom. And you broke me. And I won't let you lie anymore. The silence that ensued was total. Even the judge leaned back in her chair, visibly shaken, though she covered it over with professional composure. Claire, Emily's lawyer, moved forward kindly. Miss Carter, why did you decide to come forward today? Lily brushed her eyes, her voice soft but firm. Because I just couldn't carry it around anymore. I couldn't see my mom cry every night questioning what she had done wrong, when she didn't do anything. I couldn't sit at the dinner table and act like everything was fine when I knew Dad was going to leave us. I wanted the truth out there, no matter how painful. Emily's tears filled the air now, quiet but uncontainable. She longed to hurry to her daughter, to hug her, but she couldn't stand. Not yet, not until the world was ready to hear every word. The judge nodded at last, her tone weighty with seriousness. Thank you, Miss Carter. Your courage has been seen by this court. You may come down. As Lily walked away from the stand, the gallery stood up in a single motion, not instructed, not coordinated, simply raw human instinct. A standing ovation for her bravery. Daniel covered his face with his hands, shaking. His deception, his carefully spun web, was shattered before him by the same individual whom he believed could be manipulated perpetually. Emily's arms went wide as Lily came back to her chair. They held each other, mother and daughter, shattered but together, their sobs commingling. Daniel had been trying to quiet Emily for years. Daniel had gaslighted her, manipulated her, lied to her for years. But he never thought this would happen. He never thought his own daughter would be the one to break his empire of deceit. And as the judge's gavel came down again, bang, the truth was locked in the record for all eternity. The Carter family would never be the same. But for Emily and Lily, that wasn't a tragedy. It was the beginning of freedom. The courtroom was still, as though each occupant of the room had breathed in too long. Papers crumpled quietly. A cough was heard from the gallery. But all of them watched Daniel Carter. His jaw was clenched, fists knotted. But for the first time since the trial had started, his arrogant facade began to crack. Emily sat upright in the witness stand, hands clenched into a tight fist. The words of the prosecutor had yet to resound in the air like a sword. Mr. Carter, the prosecutor asked again, her tone even but unyielding. Do you not deny opening secret accounts in your children's names, in order to conceal marital property? Daniel's lawyer leapt to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. The state cannot produce any direct evidence that my client. But before he could continue, the prosecutor stood up, holding a thick folder and setting it on the evidence table. Actually, she said, opening it with precision, we do. The courtroom erupted with gasps, rippling like the wave against stone. Within the folder were bank statements, duplicate wire transfer records, and a paper trail in the electronic sense back to Daniel. The judge gestured for silence, his eyes however betraying his own distaste. Emily's heart was racing. She could observe Daniel's lips curl, his face flush, and his fingers drum against the highly polished wood of the defense table. The man who had promised once to love forever, now resembled a stranger trapped in the glaring light of reality. The breaking point emotion. Daniel Carter, the voice of the judge boomed. You are being presented with a straightforward question. Do you deny these accounts are yours? The room came to a standstill. Daniel moved forward, beads of sweat on his temple. His attorney whispered urgently, but Daniel shook his head rudely, pushing his attorney away. At last his voice cracked out, louder than anyone had anticipated. Fine. Yes, they're mine.
But you don't understand. The gallery exploded with shock. Emily shut her eyes, anguish pouring over her like a tsunami. She'd known it. Every fiber of her being had yelled it. But hearing Daniel own up to it in public still stung like a blade plunged into her heart. The prosecutor moved in closer. Tell the court what we don't understand. Daniel threw a look at Emily, his eyes desperate, nearly pleading. I did it to defend myself, to defend what belonged to me. His gesture towards Emily, his voice escalating with venom, was abandoning me. She wanted to take it all, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Emily's tears fell free, not out of weakness, but out of the magnitude of betrayal. Her voice shook, but she rose to her feet and spoke to the court. Protect yourself. She shook her head. Daniel, I implored you to struggle for us, not against us. I implored you to love our children more than you loved your pride. And this is what you call protection? The courtroom was stunned. The public sat agog, many of their hands clamped across their mouths. The judge's intervention. The judge's gavel came down. Order in the court. The crisp sound shocked everyone back into reality. Mr. Carter, the judge went on, his voice firm. You have just confessed to purposely concealing assets in divorce proceedings. That is fraud against this court, and it is fraud against your family. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, his haughtiness broken. His attorney hid his face in his hands. For the first time, the man who dominated every conversation, who hijacked every story, seemed small, like a trapped creature with nowhere to go. Emily gazed at him, her chest heaving and falling quickly, the tempest within her finally able to break loose. Emily's final testimony. The prosecutor glanced back at Emily. Mrs. Carter, before we finish, is there anything you would like to say to this court about the effect of your husband's actions? Emily stood up cautiously, her knees shaking but her heart unbreakable. She gazed about the room, not simply at the judge and jury, but at each and every individual who had come to watch this agonizing trial. My children are owed a father they can trust. She started softly, her voice shaking but audible. But what they received was a man who lied, who cheated, who loved greed more than he loved them. This is not about money. This is about trust, about promises, about the very foundation of a family. Her words rang out, filling the courtroom with raw, undeniable truth. Emily faced Daniel, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes unflinching. You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You betrayed them. And no matter what happens here today, you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. The silence that ensued was crushing. The collapse. Daniel attempted to speak, his lips opening, but nothing emerged. His shoulders convulsed, whether from anger, remorse, or the burden of his own ruin. No one was certain. At last his lawyer put a hand upon his shoulder, wordlessly suggesting he sit down. Defeated, Daniel put his head down. The arrogant man, once convinced that he could outwit all others, now resembled nothing more than a shadow of himself. The judge cleared his throat. This court will reconvene tomorrow for sentencing. Until then, Mr. Carter is remanded into custody for fraud and contempt of court. The gavel came down once, final and absolute. The aftermath as bailiffs came for Daniel. He attempted to stand tall, but the shackles of truth had already wrapped themselves around him more snugly than even handcuffs could. He was taken away, his formerly proud footsteps now dragging across the courtroom floor. Emily slumped back into her chair, her energy finally spent. But in exhaustion there was something new, something fierce and unshakable. Relief. The fight was far from finished, but she had overcome her worst fear, confronting the man she loved, and she had won using truth as her ally. As the onlookers gradually dispersed, murmurs surrounded the area. Some felt sorry for Daniel, others envied Emily, but all of them knew that they had just seen something extraordinary. Justice stripping away the veil of lies, to expose the naked heart of betrayal. Emily sat still, her hand on her chest, listening to the slow beat of her heart. For the first time in years, she breathed freely. She wasn't merely living anymore. She was free. The courtroom held its breath. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the world itself was waiting. The judge's eyes moved around the room, his hands clasped, his voice steady but weighty with power. Both have made strong arguments. Judge Matthews started off. His voice bore the gravity of justice itself, each word resonating in the charge chamber. This case has come to light not only of financial misdeeds, but the deep personal harm caused by dishonesty and betrayal. Emily sat on the edge of her seat, hands pressed tightly together. Her lawyer put a comforting hand on her arm, but Emily barely felt it. Her heart was thudding too hard in her chest, her pulse racing as though her existence had hung in the balance with the next sentence. Daniel, on the other hand, sat back in his chair, his expression carefully masked, though his locked jaw revealed the tempest brewing within. For a man who had previously believed himself above touch, this was agony. The judge's eyes shifted in his direction. "Mr. Carter, your behavior, diverting funds, concealing debts and shirking your family duties, illustrates a blatant disregard of both legal and ethical obligation. You opted for greed instead of loyalty, dishonesty rather than honesty." Daniel winced. His confidence mask was cracking. A soft murmur spread through the courtroom crowd, whispers of condemnation, of incredulity, of revulsion. "And Mrs. Carter," the judge went on, his attention shifting to Emily. His voice softened. "Your fortitude in presenting these facts, no matter the personal cost, is truly courageous. You have stood not just for yourself, but for the future of your children." Emily blinked away tears. Her throat constricted, but she would not look away. She wanted her children settled quietly in the back of the room, to know her as a strong one, an unbreakable one, a mother who would do anything for them.
The gavel rose higher in the judge's hand before he stopped. This court finds Daniel Carter guilty of financial misconduct, fraudulent concealment, and neglect of his responsibilities as a spouse and father. Full custody of the children goes to Emily Carter, and restitution for the stolen money will be sought. The gavel came down. The report boomed through the courtroom. Final and irrevocable. Gasps and whispers filled the room. A few leaned in, whispering amongst themselves. Emily clasped her hand to her mouth as tears poured down her face. Not of loss, but of liberation. The burden that had suffocated her for so many years was finally lifted. Her lawyer leaned in and spoke softly. "It's over, you won." But for Emily, it wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. In the background, Daniel pounded his hand on the table. His cheeks reddened with anger. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You'll be sorry, Emily." The judge slammed his gavel a second time. "Mr. Carter, order in the courtroom. You are in contempt if you do not behave yourself." But Daniel's voice broke, and instead of strength, only desperation revealed itself. His house of deceit had fallen down upon him, and all he could do was strike out. His lawyer pulled at his arm, telling him to sit, to be quiet. But the harm was already done. Everyone had witnessed him for what he really was. Emily stood slowly. For the first time in years, she was taller than him, stronger than him. She turned, her eyes meeting his raging stare, and in a steady voice, she spoke words that shut him up more than any gavel ever could. "No, Daniel, the only regret here is yours." The room fell silent. Even Daniel stopped dead in his tracks, his mouth wide open but no sounds escaping. Emily picked up her belongings, her hands shaking a little, but her heart freer than it had been in years. She passed by the ranks of onlookers, their faces etched with admiration, pity, and awe. When she arrived at her children in the back, they hugged her tightly. "Mom, you did it," her eldest whispered. Emily pressed them to her, tears wetting their hair. "No, sweetheart. We did it, we're free now." Outside the courthouse, everything seemed more vivid. The sun was low, coloring the sky in stripes of gold and pink. Reporters clung, cameras blinking, microphones shoved forward. "Emily, how do you feel after the verdict?" one asked. She smiled weakly, clinging to her children. "I feel free. Justice isn't merely about punishment, it's about truth." And today the truth prevailed at last. Her statements went across headlines in hours. To others it was merely another case in the courtroom. But to Emily, it was the end of a chapter full of pain, betrayal, and lies, and the start of a new one grounded on resilience, hope, and love. Daniel, on the other hand, was led out of the side doors, head down, his fate unknown. For a man who had believed he was in charge of everything, he was now left with only the ringing of his own failure. Emily strode away from the courthouse, her children's hands enveloped in hers, the burden of her past at last gone from her shoulders. Every step ahead was no longer a step in terror, but a step in liberty. And though the wounds of deceit would never fully heal, Emily understood one thing would continue to propel her ahead forever. She had stood, she had fought, and she had won.